Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, Accelerating Code Quality with the DORA Metrics, brought to you by Rollbar. We have an awesome webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping items with you. First, please remember that this event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. Second, we are taking questions throughout the presentation, so you can use the Q&A tab on your console to submit questions at any time. We will try and get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. We've got some awesome handouts available for you in your handouts tab too. There's a couple things that you can go ahead and download and take with you. There's some really great reading there, so we really recommend that you take advantage of that. Some real good stuff. And finally, we're going to have some audience polling questions come up for you today, and we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a couple seconds and let us know your thoughts. All right. Oh, I almost forgot the most important part. We're going to do a drawing at the end for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stick around and see if you are a winner. But first, and of course, most importantly, I am pleased to introduce you today Nico Kruger. He's the Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Rollbar. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn my camera off, and let Nico take it away.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining wherever you are in the world. Hopefully, we'll get to show you some very interesting data around the DORA metrics and how you could utilize them to help you accelerate your code quality for your teams, be it small or those large enterprise teams as well. So a bit of information about me. My name is Nico Kruger, Sharon mentioned. I spent the last 13 odd years working with customers from all types of industries, specifically around software engineering efficiency and improving code quality. And that has been across multiple industries, from automotive, medical device, high-tech, startups. So really any part of the different verticals we've seen in the market. And part of my role at Rollbar is working with our customers, both small and large, and helping them get the best out of our tools, but also helping them build better quality software. And at Rollbar, we have some phenomenal technology to help people, move software into the hands of their customers faster whilst reducing risk. And one of the things we always look at is how we can help customers do that. So one of the ways, and this jumps straight into our agenda, is the DORA metrics. So we're going to learn today, first of all, what is the DORA metrics? What is it all about? Then we'll learn a bit more about continuous code improvement. What is continuous code improvement? Why should you look to be doing this with your teams? And then secondly, what are the benefits of using the DORA metrics and becoming what they call an elite performer? So what should you see in your organization as the things that you could gain when you start to move in that direction? And then finally, what does the journey look like when you start to accelerate code quality? And what are some of the things you'll see and some of the items our customers have seen they benefit from when starting to go down this journey with continuous code quality? So we're also going to have a couple of polls up, and we'd love to get your feedback. So please get us those polls. And the first one is, are you familiar with the DORA metrics? We'd love to get your feedback before we jump into what it actually is. Do you actually know what it is? Have you heard about it? And then we'll have some other polls coming on later on as well. So I'd love to get your feedback on those as well. So the DORA metrics is a research project that was commissioned by the Google DORA team, which is why it's called the DORA metrics. And it's a multi-year research program they kicked off to understand, how the best of the best is delivering great quality software, how they're measuring this from a technical process perspective, from a culture perspective, and how do they get such high quality out, but also how is the most highly attractive from a revenue perspective companies also delivering great pieces of software. So it's not only the software delivery itself, but also how does that match up with revenue for my company? How do we build products that are actually delivering the outcomes the business is looking for as well? And this is a freely available research piece of content you can pick up from the official DORA website. And we'll cover some of those items and how you could use them to become better with your teams as well. So the DORA metrics are really all about 4 key metrics inside of DORA that they identified over this research period. And the first is lead time. And that is, how long does it take you to get working code, software features into the hands of your customers? So all the way from the idea, through building it, testing it, running through all your cycles, into the hand of your customers, using it and getting value from those products. And then how quickly and how frequently are you deploying it? And that's called deploy frequency. So how quickly can we then actually get this into a deployed cycle into the hands of our customers again? And then when you start to deploy lots and lots of changes, maybe once or twice a day, up to many hundreds of times a day, how many of these actually fail? And then finally, if there's any failures, how do you handle getting back to a working state, or often called the time to restore? And those are the 4 key metrics that DORA looks at. You'll see another one on the screen here called availability. That's not really one they looked at for the purposes of the DORA metrics. But again, we'll put that one aside for today and really going to focus on the lead time, deployment frequency, change failure rates, and then the time to restore or time to get back to a working state of your software. So hopefully we're able to answer some of those polls and start to get some of the feedback. So make sure that you definitely answer those polls as well. So how does DORA actually work, and how do you measure these things? So DORA has really 4 scales. If you're an elite performer, you are the best of the best. This is some of the best companies in the world that deliver high quality software, have great revenue attached to those, and can push out changes quite frequently. Those are typically considered elite performers, and they have a definition for each one of these. And then at the other side of the spectrum is your low performers. And those would typically be those that are maybe on older technologies and trying to transform to more modern practices of this. And there's a scale how you can start to measure yourself where you are today, and then see the steps required to go from low all the way to an elite performer. So let's take the first DORA metric, which is deploy frequency. So the elite performers are really those companies that are able to deploy changes multiple times per day. That could be 2, 3, 4, up to 10 or 100 times a day. In fact, at Rollbar, we have customers that are deploying upwards of 40 to 50 times every single day, some in the hundreds of times a day. Now, of course, these are smaller changes, but they can push these out very quickly to their customers and very quickly gain feedback if this is working, is it solving the problem as it was intended to. Now, if you look at the lower end of the scale, of course, our low performers are those companies that really struggle to get releases out and really almost do it once a month, or even maybe only once or twice in a year. So maybe once in 6 months, which is a very, very long time. And part of that is that they have to bunch a lot of changes together, which increases their deployment risks. So one of the DORA metrics is obviously its deployment frequency, but you'll see it actually leads to lowering the risk of your deploys into production as well. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we move to an elite performer, we are starting to deploy multiple times a day. And we'll talk a bit about the things you'll need to do that on a scalable way and with a high confidence that all these releases will work. Now, the elite performers were able to deploy quite frequently. Also, their lead time for changes was less than a day. So they were able to figure out a change, a feature. Typically, these are small changes, bundle it up, and get it into the hands of their customers within a day or so. If you again look at our low performers, some of them are tied to that deploy frequency, but also it took a very, very long time, a year, 6 months, to get changes out to their customers. Some of them, we'd consider good. Maybe a month for them was good, but that is considered by modern software engineering standards as a very low measurement for getting changes or improvements out into the hands of your customers. So again, lead time for change is something we want to look to improve and move that more to the elite category for the DORA metrics. Now, when we're doing lots of changes and we're pushing out these changes quite quickly, we would expect a change failure rate to be quite high. And what the DORA research actually identified was that those in the elite category actually had a 0 to 15% failure rate. So their failure rate on pushing these changes out were actually quite low. And if you look down to the right on the low performers, they had a close to 50 or 60% failure rate to get those changes out. And one of the interesting bits that the DORA research identified was for those that are putting out lots of deployment frequencies, a lot of releases, they were able to restore their services when they're down in less than an hour. And in fact, a lot of times system restore process was very similar to the normal deploy process because they do it that often. And again, when you look at the low performers, because they don't deploy often, time to restore was often weeks or months to get a system fully functioning and back into the hands of our customers, which is a massive drain on potential revenue streams if you use your product to generate revenue. So again, what DORA identified here is how do we measure these things so we can categorize ourselves, but they also identified a couple of interesting trends with these DORA metrics. So we do want to show poll 2 as well, if we can get that up. So we can go over some of the benefits of becoming an elite performer. So if you are currently using the DORA metrics, give us that answer so we know how many of you are using the DORA metrics today. Perfect. So when we look at the benefits of becoming an elite performer, so that is you started working with the DORA metrics, your team wants to improve. What are some of the benefits that you should be getting by doing this? Because oftentimes people start to go down a path. We want to do this improvement. We want to get our teams to be better, but we don't know why. We don't know the outcome we're seeking. And with the DORA metrics, they were able to measure this with customers that went down that path, right? So when we want to become an elite performer, here are some of the examples of what you will gain as some organizations have went down this path already. So the first one was, those elite performers were actually deploying 208 times more frequently compared with those low performers, right? And they were getting changes out. Their lead times were actually 106% faster compared with low performers. So it's a big, big change in not only the culture and mindset of how they're producing software and getting it out to their customers, but the changes were coming out at a rate which is much higher than any of their competitors. So if you're in a competitive market situation like most of us are, it is important not only to get your changes out to the market, but you need to get them out frequently and fast, right? These markets are evolving quickly, so you need to have a process that allows you to respond quickly or lead the pack by simply deploying many, many more changes and updates and improvements into the hands of your customers. The next one was software stability. You might think that if we're deploying a lot of times a day, many hundreds of times a day, or 50 or 60 times a day, we're going to have stability issues, because that's often what a lot of low performers are used to. When we push out something, a lot of things break. There's a lot of time spent on getting this solved. And with our elite performers in the DORA metrics category, those high performers did not trade off speed for stability. In fact, they were able to recover 2.6 times faster and had a 7x lower change failure rate. So they were actually getting changes out not only faster, recovering from failures much faster because they were doing it so frequently. So it really wasn't something new. It was a well-oiled machine, as you can say. So they were able to respond to these changes or breakages very, very quickly. And a part of that could be implementing things like feature flags or kill switches to turn things on or off when they do go wrong. So using some of those methods available to us today to help facilitate the improved stability that our customers are often seeking from our solutions as well. The very interesting feedback from the DORA metrics was that the high performers and elite performers actually spend 50% less of their time fixing security issues. And this isn't an outcome that DORA metrics really was looking to measure. It is something they actually picked up as they were doing this research. And the interesting part of this, it shows you that if you want to get security right, you better start building it in from the beginning. And if you want to be an elite performer, you don't want to be spending time fixing security holes, patching every 6 months, because that leaves a big, big gap with certain security holes that could be not that beneficial to your customers if they get intruded upon. So a very interesting finding from the DORA research as well. Again, quite a surprising one, which they found for those elite and high performers as well. So now I want to dive a bit into what is continuous code improvement. So if we want to become an elite performer, or at least a high performer, according to those DORA metrics, we want to improve continuously. Our code needs to get better because we want to release with more stability, more frequency, and we definitely want to put out higher quality code, which everybody wants to do. So one of the things we look at is how do we improve throughout our code pipeline? One of the interesting things, a fact of life, as you can see over there, is that every piece of software will have a bug. There will be bugs that will slip into production or pre-production or staging. Especially if we start to move very, very quickly, we should expect there is a level of risk that we need to change our mindsets to, that some risk should be accepted when we go into production, but how do we mitigate that risk? And so what we want to do is continuously improve our code quality throughout this pipeline. The first part is, let's start at the CI/CD process and testing. How do we identify errors early in the cycle? So you're looking at your unit testing, your test automation processes for when code is committed, the code review process. So how do we get better code into the system at the very get-go of this process? And one of the things we need to figure out is, when errors start to happen, how do we identify them, classify them so we can know about them, and then also figure out how we respond to those. So we need a method to capture those things, and typically that's quite easy for developers in the debug phases as they're creating code. When you start to push it into the testing cycles and the staging cycles, you have less visibility as an engineer into what your code is doing, and you often rely on lots of logs to look at. So we need a better way to identify when things go wrong in those stages, what actually happened at a code level, so we can start to fix those as well. And then, of course, when we get into the production phase, we want to know instantly if something goes wrong at a code level. We don't want to wait for lots of logs to appear for customers, which is even worse, to report to us that something is broken. We want to be proactive and constantly be improving our code on a proactive basis versus waiting for customers to respond. And we want to do that in real time. As engineers, there's nothing better than knowing about something even before the customer reports it, so you can fix it and address it and get that fix out within an hour if you want to be an elite performer, to get those changes pushed through back into production. So we want to improve the whole pipeline to get that continuous code quality. And for that, we need visibility into what's going on in errors. So the way we need to solve this is, we need to take all errors that come in throughout this pipeline, and we need to understand them. So we call that a fingerprint for every error. And what does that mean? It means, if you look at traditional logging systems, you'll get thousands upon thousands, if not millions of logs that enter, and you need to go figure out what's going on. If we take a system that's able to look at errors, millions of them, and categorize them and fingerprint them, much like a human being, and saying, you are a unique error and you've occurred this million times, and I can see how many customers were impacted, I have a much better sense of what is truly important, what's truly an error, versus what is something that's just considered noise. So we need to go and understand our unique errors so we can react to them on a proactive basis. And then once we know if these errors are indeed unique, we need to understand everything around them. That is their code context and the tracing. How did we get there? So one of the things typically engineers struggle with is, they have tools that'll do code scanning up front, for example, SonarQube or things like that. But what that gives you is pre-compiled. When you look at something like Rollbar, it is in the tool at runtime, and when an error happens, it takes that full stack trace. And then when you integrate with things like GitHub or GitLab, we will show you the error, we'll get you the code context, and also the full stack trace of how you get there at runtime. And that is the big differentiator. It is at runtime, and it is part of your code. It is not looking from the outside in. So that's one of the things we want to do. We want to be part of the code that's actually running in production or pre-production, so we can be part of that process when errors happen, and we can do something about them. Now, of course, as a developer, I'm used to typically having my stack trace in Visual Studio or Eclipse or VS Code. When something is in production, I have a lot less visibility into that. And you need a tool that can grab those errors, group them, and give you that full stack trace so you can do the right thing quickly. What's also nice about giving each error a fingerprint is, if somebody fixed it before, you can actually go look at what the fix was. Did somebody maybe break that by accident, maybe not included in a build? But it's a great way to understand errors and resolve them much, much faster. And then one of the other things to solve this problem is, when we have lots and lots of errors or problems that are creeping into production, what do we do first? Right? A lot of us would have a ton of technical debt. We don't know which hand to take, left, right. There's so many things coming in. Where do we go first? What do we have to do next to respond to these errors? So you need a system that can gather these things and also tell you who of your customers are impacted. Which errors are the most impactful to your customers, stopping them from using your system or gaining value, or potentially stopping revenue from coming in. So again, you need a system to be able to track what we call the blast radius of how this problem is impacting your customers as well. So how do we actually go about solving this in real time? Now at Rollbar, our mission is really to make the life of developers easier by finding and debugging and getting code out faster and back into production if there's a problem. So the way we do this at Rollbar is actually quite ingenious in the fact that you've got an SDK that you implement into your code, and you could use any language or framework out there if you're using Java, if you're using .NET, if you're using Flutter, if you're using Java, C++, even Salesforce Apex, Node.js, React, Python, Ruby, Browser.js, anything is available for most of the popular frameworks out there. And once you've implemented or instrumented Rollbar in your code, we are now able at runtime to gather these errors and then start to put them into an error repository. And what that does is it figures out automatically with our machine learning capabilities. We look at every single error, and through all our customers, which is just over 5,500 customers around the world, we have a lot of errors that we scan and look at to understand what are unique errors, what are not unique errors. So our machine learning happens all day long, and it gets better and better at grouping these errors, which is one of the big advantages to then make this error repository actionable. And what I mean by that is when we get a unique error, we truly know that it's a brand new error. We know it's a reactivated error or something we've already seen before, so that we can do something with it. And that could be sending a Slack notification to the right team member to react to it, creating a Jira ticket, sending it to Datadog, or doing something else, right? It could be turning a feature flag on or off. So let's, for example, say you deployed a new feature, some errors come in after maybe the 10th error. You want to say, look, let's just turn that feature switch off. We have those integrations available as well. And what that means is you can be a lot more proactive with the way that you are addressing your code quality. So your system actually gets better and better over time because you're learning proactively when things are going wrong. And Rollbar will do this continuously across your back end, your front end, for web, for mobile applications. And you can even utilize this during your testing processes. So as you're running your testing scripts, maybe in Selenium or Cypress, and your test reports fail, you may be lacking some code context, you can even link Rollbar up to provide the true error context for you during the test execution phase as well. So a lot of use cases to make your life in finding and identifying errors a lot simpler and easier going forward. Now, some of the benefits in working with our customers that we've seen is, for most of our customers, they said the biggest risk for them, and about 34% told us this, that the biggest risk is losing a customer because of a bug. So what they want is a better user experience for their customers day in and day out. So what they need is visibility instantly in real time to when something goes wrong. And we can only do that if we're part of a code at deploy and we can know what's going on so we can respond to it in real time. 37% said they spend about 25% of their time just fixing bugs. So that is a lot of wasted productive time, which a lot of people are spending on trying to identify a bug, then trying to reproduce it, maybe trying to rerun a test, or trying to figure out what really happened in production, and then trying to reproduce and then actually fix that, because they're lacking all the information to truly help them fix an error. And again, this is something we've seen a lot of Rollbar customers gain a tremendous amount of value from, where they are able to reduce that time to actually identify and actually fix a bug much faster. And then we also saw about 84% of developers said they're actually being held back from moving to an elite performer by deploying more often because of the confidence they have when they push something into production. Will this work? Will they even know if it breaks? So there's a whole confidence lacking in teams to push things on a daily basis or even multiple times a day, because they really don't know if it broke, and if it breaks, what to do about it. Will they be able to respond fast enough? So giving developers and release teams that confidence is critical to start to move towards an elite performer for the DORA metrics as well. So what does the journey look like? So for a lot of our customers, they've gone down this journey and said, look, we want to continuously improve our code quality. We want to become elite performers. And not everybody has to conform to the DORA metrics. It's certainly a North Star if you want to know what the best of the best is doing. But for a lot of our customers, they start to see some of the results from using and starting to use the continuous code improvement platform like Rollbar. The first is, they move their deploy success rates from about 50 all the way to about 95%. And that is a massive jump. Why is that? Well, first of all, you have the confidence to deploy because you know you'll catch errors. And then also with the automation grade grouping, you can do something if it does go wrong, meaning roll back, turn a feature flag on or off. So it gives them the ability to push out in more confidence and then do something with those. But the result is many more successful deploy rates because they have much more visibility into errors. And one of the other great pieces of information I always like to learn from our customers is the mean time to actually know about an error, the MTTA, for errors in production. So do you sometimes wait for your customer to tell you that there's an error and then you respond to it? The best of the best actually know about these errors in real time. So instead of waiting an hour or a couple of hours or waiting for the first help desk ticket, they will simply open up something like Rollbar and they know within 1 to 3 seconds after a release is pushed out if anything has broken, if there's new errors introduced, and what to do about them. And that typically, for most of our customers, goes from a 1 hour MTTA to about 5 minutes, which is a massive jump for them to understand what's actually going on in either staging or production environment when they start to push out this code. And imagine if you're starting to push out many, many releases every day. So you're putting about 30 or 40 releases a day. This is something that you want to be on top of, and you want to know and respond very, very quickly. But the biggest gain of all, by far, is the sheer amount of time that our engineers or developers are getting back. They're spending about 10% now of their time fixing these bugs. So the time gained from just getting the knowledge, the visibility into errors, knowing where the real problem is, the root cause in a single tool, gives them that time back, and they can actually fix it faster, get it back to the pipeline, but more importantly, spend time building the features, the capabilities that they want in their tools. And that's some of the biggest gains we've seen for our customers that use something like Rollbar. So we ran a developer survey, and we want to make this survey available to everybody on the call today. So please feel free to register and get a copy of the State of Software Code report from Rollbar, where we surveyed just about 1,000 developers across the country in North America. And we got some interesting feedback from them as well. And so about 46% of developers said they rely on an error monitoring tool. So that means, roughly half of the engineers out there just don't have any visibility into what's going on in errors. And we're not talking about logging. We're not talking about stuff that you really don't want to ever look at because there's just too many of them. We're talking about a proactive error monitoring system that notifies you, that is proactive with you in identifying these errors as well. And then a quite interesting stat is about 80% also said they actually find out of errors or bugs from user complaints, which is a big hurdle for a lot of teams that they want to climb over and get lower, right? We want to know about those things, fix them before our customers actually know about them. So being proactive and finding ways to solve that is certainly something we at Rollbar help customers with day in and day out. So make sure you get a copy of that report. We've got the URL on screen as well, so you can go ahead and grab a copy of that report as well. Perfect. So I see we do have some questions coming in over here. So maybe Sharon, I'll grab the first one. What's the rate of adoption of these metrics in the industry? And that's a great question. It depends on the types of industry. We certainly see those companies that are moving to SaaS type products with lots of microservices, adopting more modern practices, have a very high rate of this. We are seeing on the flip side, the more traditional businesses, which really have a very high-risk products, so they're very afraid of putting out lots of releases because there's lots of risk associated with, certainly have a much lower adoption rate. And so roughly we're seeing, on the higher tech companies, a much higher rate of adoption for those types of technologies, especially with DORA metrics.
So if, say you have someone who reads the report, or perhaps someone in the audience here that's listening to your presentation and they're like, I need to go back to my company and have them adopt these metrics in our team so we can get better. What's the best way that they can approach that? How can they convince their IT leadership that these are needed to improve the pipeline?
Absolutely. So, the great thing is the DORA metrics is done by nobody else than Google, right? So it is one of those companies, they know how to make software, right? They know how to get this out at scale. and for millions upon millions of users. And I'm just looking at the poll results. And so we do have about 70% that say, look, our organizations simply aren't using things like DORA. So the best way to do it is if you just go to Google and search for Fedora metrics. They have a whole portal or site dedicated to Fedora metrics, where there's actually toolkits you can use to enter what you do today, and they will tell you where you are in the DORA scorecard. So you'll get a DORA scorecard, and then you can start to get details from them on how you can improve to every single stage using these metrics. So how do I go from low, medium, high, all the way to elite? So that's the first thing I would do, is research Fedora metrics, take their online tool to get where you are today, and then you will also use their tool to get some metrics. Yep, we're back. Here we go. So I would definitely do that first. And then they also have various tools that you can plug into your existing tool sets that'll monitor how many deploys you're doing, how many releases you're doing. So it can actually automatically start to give you your DORA scorecard as well. So if you're using a lot of Git commits or pushing out deploys, it can actually start to count those for you as well. The other way is, using something like Rollbar, we collect a lot of that information. We can start to help build that DORA scorecard for you as well.
Cool. And sorry about that. That was me. All right. So then what's a good place to start once you bring those metrics into the teams? Are there do you start with one particular metric is a good starting place, or just pick the one that you want to improve the most?
That's a great question. I mean, for a lot of these metrics, you can't do everything at once, right? You can't boil the ocean. It's impossible. So what we typically say is you don't want to start to release just often just because you want to hit the metric and the quality is poor. So what you want to do is you want a staged approach to this. So oftentimes for teams that you really are on the lower side, it's getting into an internal environment more frequently, meaning you're deploying into a pre-production or staging environment multiple times a day. So you can get the process of deploying down, you can get the process of rolling back down, you can smooth that out before you start to push this into production. So what we see a lot of customers doing is taking it step by step and saying, okay, for our internal development work, what we'll start to do is we'll start to deploy that very frequently, meaning we commit the code, it runs the CI/CD pipeline, it's doing our testing, it's actually putting it into a staging environment, so we can start to get that going. And once you get that confidence, you can then move on to the other parts, which is simulating fallbacks or rollbacks, turning feature flags on or off. And then once you get that working in staging, you can then start to move into pre-production or then production if you start to feel comfortable with it. But the goal isn't here to get 100 deploys. That shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be value to your customers. So getting features into the hands that actually make a difference. And that's what you should be aiming for. And the method of doing that is releasing more often or releasing value more often. So I always say the metric isn't releases, it's the value of that release. That's actually what you want to measure. So how many features or capabilities are we pushing out to our customers that actually make their life a bit better?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, with that, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. And thank you, Nico, for that amazing presentation. There are some handouts. If you haven't downloaded those already, head on over to the handouts tab and pull those down so you can read more and hopefully get on the road to improving your code and your DORA metric scores. All right, so just as a reminder, the session has been recorded, so you can go back and watch it again if you happen to miss anything. We will send you an email with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand, or you can always visit us at devops.com/webinars. It will be there for you as well. All right, so I am going to draw the winners of our Amazon gift card drawing, and they are Mercedes S. is our first winner today. Congratulations to you. Our next winner is Jeff L. Congratulations to Jeff. Third winner today is Manny R. And our fourth winner is Martin W. Congratulations to all our Amazon gift card winners. So we will be sending you instructions for how to claim your gift cards. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. If you don't see it, make sure and check your spam folders. Thank you again, Nico. It was Great pleasure spending this time with you, and thank you to the audience for tuning in and for those great questions. We hope to see you again very soon at another DevOps.com webinar. I am Sharon Florentine, signing off.